Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LJL Podcast, Season 2, Episode number 10, gentlemen. We've hit the final. We're back to double digits once again. That means we're actually closer to Episode 50. Can you believe we've almost done 50 episodes of this?
No, I can't. It's making me feel old. Let's stop that.
Nymaera?
It's been a heck of a journey, yeah. I kind of sat there and I'm like, oh yeah, we just kind of do this thing every week. And you sit down for enough weeks and suddenly you've got all these like podcast episodes racked up behind you and like, wait, where did all that come from?
It is scary to think that we've done it for so long, but gentlemen, let me introduce you properly, even though we're not quite at that episode 50 number. The man in the middle, the charming man himself, Initia1ise. Welcome to the show, as always.
Nice to be here. Pleasure to be talking about some more LJL stuff. Kind of interested to hear what your guys' thoughts were on the series when we get to it.
And the other man who is helping with producing this podcast is the commonsensical man himself, Nymaera. Hello, sir.
Nothing but common sense from me, Bez. You'll all know if you know me.
I think he mispronounced nonsensical because that makes a lot more sense for you.
I said exactly what I meant, sir. Just because you're the older sibling does not mean you speak for me. Alex's sometimes stick together.
Sometimes, we have a whole council and everything, like we've got like certain districts that only certain Alexes are allowed to get. Like we've got a whole system.
I'm assuming you're the court fool then.
That's the one, yeah.
I mean, someone has to be in the ivory tower sometimes, right? So it can be all over the place. But hey, sometimes he's the jester, sometimes he's the king. It depends on if he's dropped his crown or not. We'll have to see. Hey, king, you dropped these. Gentlemen, before we go into further talking of kings dropping crowns and everything, Nymaera, what is this podcast?
What is this podcast? Well, we talk about Japanese League of Legends on this podcast. We got together as us three last year in February. So actually, I guess it's like beyond our happy anniversary at this point by quite a long way. We got together as us three and said, let's go cover ourselves some Japanese League of Legends, which notably means the LJL.
And we've been doing it for well over a year now. That's a full split done. Two splits done, and we're now upon the end of our third, and that must mean Initia1ise we have some form of connection with Riot Games, our partners, or something along those lines.
Alas, no, we don't. We are doing this by ourselves, all off our own back. It means our own opinions. It means Riot's not involved. So if they do want to get in contact, please do. We'd love to talk to those Rioters out there who are interested in this stuff.
As that said, you can find each of our social media links right below our lovely faces. But if you're listening through this through all of the audio streaming platforms which this podcast does go out on, you can find it in the show notes. Or if you're on YouTube and you're too lazy to type in anything, link is in the description down below. Gentlemen, we have a Discord, we have a Twitter, we have an Instagram where you can find all of the links for the LJLOU as well. Not just ourselves, though. We do plug ourselves rather well. This podcast, we've got a fair few things to talk about in this one. We've got, obviously, the 3-0 prediction that only I knew was coming of Sengoku Gaming versus Crest Gaming Act. I won't spoil which direction that went in if anyone hasn't listened and they're waiting for our podcast to recap it, but it only I was big brain enough to predict it. Though we all did predict. Wait, no, we didn't.
No,
we knew.
No,
somebody didn't. Yeah, somebody.
Oops.
Somebody decided to be contrary.
This is why he dropped his crown for this week. It's just hinting towards that one. We will then also be talking about our predictions going into the V3 versus the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks gaming. Obviously recapping the previous matches and then just kind of giving our perspectives on that before we get into your questions at the end, which obviously, if you are interested in asking us any question around the LJL, Japanese League of Legends, or just the League of Legends in general, or just LOL Esports, you can obviously ask us questions in either our podcast questions part of our Discord, or you can go over to our Twitter and DM us either individually your questions or the LJLOU podcast or LJLOU Disc Twitter. There we go. I got there eventually. It's whatever. Gentlemen, we first must talk about, though, our main topic, which is going to be recapping Sengoku Gaming facing off against Crest Gaming Act. And gentlemen, Is there any way to really go around this outside of being this wasn't what we all expected this to be? Even though I predicted this, I didn't think it would go like this, is fair to say. Who wants to go first?
Okay, so I'll put this out there. I was expecting some of the games to go to where that did. Where I expected some of the games to be bot diff, Sengoku Gaming crushing it. The thing is, I was also expecting there to be a game or two where we saw Cassin and Nation get to pop off. And honestly, they didn't really get the chance because bot lane died so hard. Mostly.
I mean, this was a series of it starting out as best it could for Crest Gaming Act, and then that's where it kind of landed.
It went downhill pretty quickly, and it didn't start at the highest point for CGA. So yeah, I went into this predicting CJ 3-2. So I went into this and I thought, okay, CJ, they definitely have some tools to play around. That didn't really, well, maybe we saw a little bit of it in the first game, just not anything after that.
Yeah, so let's just confirm it. So you, Nymaera, as you said, 3-2 to Crest Gaming Act. Initialize, what was your prediction?
I was 3-1 to Sengoku Gaming.
And why did you get there?
Basically, because I was expecting Sengoku to run over a couple games and then have one game when Nation and Cassin popped off.
Yeah, I thought that Sengoku would kind of like smash bot lane a couple of games, but then a couple of others, they would either not have the right draft or kind of CJ would end up removing some of those picks like, you know, Thresh or Aphelios or whatever, which they've played so strongly around, to then allow Nap and Alchemy to have really big team fights the way that they ended up beating Sengoku in the last week of the regular season. So I was like, all right, okay, they've shown it, proof of concept. And, well, okay, maybe it didn't happen like that.
No, I predicted a 3-0 to Sengoku Gaming, though I thought these games, like, while I'm predicting a 3-0, which does go, I'm expecting a shutout. You can expect a shutout, but you can expect competitive games. I thought this at least would be, I thought 2 out of the 3 games. Yeah, I thought it was going to be 2 very close games, and then 1 game where Sengoku would just slap, as we all expected Sengoku to at least have 1 game like that in all of our predictions. So I don't think it's crazy. Let's start from the first game, gentlemen, because it's
the scoreboard on screen because I'm nice like that.
Look at that professionalism.
You know it.
And this is why he's commonsensical. Like, this is it's all part of the plan. Game number 1 was the best case scenario for Crest Gaming Act, and if you're looking at that scoreboard, you'd be like, well, 5 kill difference doesn't sound bad, but that's like an 8k gold difference. And Nymaera, this was a game that started, well, honestly, for the first like 15-20 minutes of this game, it was pretty even.
It could have gone so much worse for CGA, particularly because, I mean, looking at that scoreboard, of course, you can see Jace versus Gnar, and you'll notice at the end of the game, Gnar was up like 50 CS, only died twice, Paz went 1 and 3, and thinking, okay, this is a Jace game that didn't work in favor of the Jace. Normally, that's a bit of a death knell. If Jace doesn't get rolling, things are pretty awkward, right? But then you also look at Gango and NT, and they just absolutely crushed it on the other side of the map. It was a bit split between kind of those two, I suppose, having CJ winning top side and then losing bot side so heavily. But yeah, early on, Nap was in a good position, couldn't be the same, and also Nation, also in a really good position on the side, landing a lot of paddle stars. So early game, as you're saying, actually, I would say was almost CJ favored.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd agree.
It was an interesting, because I know when we came into the game, we said, look, they've drafted a Aphelios Thresh bot side of Sengoku Gaming, and then a Jace top side. And it's like, okay, well, at that point, you're trying to play strong side all of the map with that kind of draft. It's what we've seen before. And like, that basically meant they left the Jace alone, is the point there. And basically, Cassin then had a choice either to follow down towards the bot lane and try and make it a 3v3 down there, or focus down the Jace. And he chose to focus down the Jace, and it worked out pretty well. They got a great dive onto the Jace early on for first blood. They managed to get him again by the tier 2 in bot lane a little later on with a really well-timed dive. So there's a couple really great dives that got Cassin and Nap ahead. So that was really, really good. But the thing is, the pressure top was kind of combated by pressure bot, where Gango and NT just eviscerated Milan and Alchemy. Like, it wasn't even close. Like, Paz, for all that he kind of got left in a 2v1 a lot, was still mildly useful. And again, like for all that Ramone was getting poked out, particularly lane by the Zoe, because again, not a lot of vision around mid lane because it had all been put down bot lane. He didn't die, didn't lose that much CS, so he was kind of feasible.
Yeah.
So like the Azir survives even through pressure, and the Jace is still like
I'd
he's not great, but he's not in lost condition.
Really, with Ramone, I don't know about you, Nymaera, but I think Ramone did exactly what he had to set out and do in this game.
So
Nullify Nation, right?
So, well, it's not necessarily Zoe getting their own advantages. The important thing about this is because we saw so much with Sengoku with their old 2v2 in mid and jungle, right, between Period and Blank, where you just use that pressure to get the Graves online. Crash was stealing away, was getting a lot of camp stolen away from them by Kassin. Kassin was relevant in this game. For me, Nation poking out Ramone just meant that Crash couldn't get the resources that he really wanted in this game. That's what the more important thing was. And we were seeing things like Nation stopping Ramone from being unlocked on the Azir as well, particularly because if you have a winning jungle matchup with that Azir into Zoe isn't played very much for good reasons. If you have hard engage that can go on top of it, having stuff like that Hecarim definitely helps with that, then Zoe doesn't really get to play the game. I do think that Ramone did a good job of not dying. He stayed up in CS. They didn't really deny the Azir or anything. It just led to more stuff in the jungle. Problem was, if we're going down to the other kind of like, well, what are the X factors? How bad was it kind of lane matchups? The fact that Aphelios and Thresh managed to do what they did bot lane with a cull, that is just like absolute like shit scaring for CGA. Because that is just like completely worst case scenario. Because you know at about 10 minutes in, you're going to be another 500 gold behind, and Aphelios is going to get to their mythic for like second, third dragon spawn, and that's terrifying for CJ, and it was terrifying for them.
I'll also call out a little bit that Crash actually did a really good job about getting the right objectives in this one as well. So like actually Graves recalled that allowed him to get the early Herald for Hecarim at about the 8-minute mark. He gets to take that Herald and rotate it down bot lane to get his Gango all the plates on the turret, already having had a cull cash in. And so they get first turret, all plates onto an Aphelios, and then he gets to roam elsewhere and get more plates elsewhere. And like, for all that Graves was trying to invade a little bit, I think Crash did a fairly good job about responding pretty well and never fell miles behind in farm, which is always a risk against a Graves that's accelerated.
He was behind, but not like out of sight.
And even then, like, he's a tank Hecarim who's not fallen behind the Graves, which is, well, not fallen mildly behind the Graves, and still gets the early Herald to get his Aphelios ahead. At that point, it's like, okay, well, you've got an early Mountain Drake, and that's great, but at the same time, like, what you're trading it for a vast amount of gold. Like, the Herald was taken without any plates going down anywhere else, really, for CGA.
I'll be honest, it never felt like the dragons were ever going to amount to much. Like it always felt like, okay, Crest Gaming Act are getting the dragons, but that's more because Sengoku Gaming are planning to try and funnel the gold, right? This is something we've talked a little bit about, and this was Crash funneling gold onto this Aphelios. This Gango just got really hyper accelerated further into this game, and then when it came to some of those huge team fights, it didn't matter what Nahum was trying to do, it didn't matter what Milan was trying to do. Gango and Crash just kind of destroyed the first big team fight around that dragon, and it all felt like it was a bit for nothing. And then they obviously Sengoku got Baron afterwards.
So they snuck the Baron, right? They didn't actually end up taking the first Baron off that one, right? So because as far as I remember,
it was like a minute after, but they saw that Crest Gaming Act went bot side, so they were like free Baron.
So there was the big fight of Dragon, and that kind of went evenish. I think it was like a 4-for-3, yeah, because Milan survived on the Xayah, and then we had the Jason the Thresh just making it out. Gango did get shut down in that team fight the one time he died that game, but just before that fight, again, it seemed like NT and the rest of Sengoku were not really landing their poke because Shock Blast weren't landing, hooks weren't landing. On the other side, Bubbles were. And Nahum was actually having a really good impact on the lead up to that fight. So it felt to me, CGA, they kind of got away a bit with Murder managing to somehow get into the river without getting CC'd. That was a big thing. But then, yeah, I mean, Nap actually had a really good team fight. Alchemy had a really good team fight. They managed to lock up the Gango on the Aphelios for long enough. The big thing for me is that after that, as you were saying, the reset from CJ was shoddy as heck. It was shoddy as heck, and the Baron just disappeared. After that, you then saw mid out a turret getting lost, and then suddenly you've got no vision. You're fighting on your own side of the map as a Zoe who's just lost their turret after you'd been in control of so much of that game. I think CJ were actually in a winning position because of the way Nation was playing. After that, yeah, Nation still played well, but your champion just does not succeed in those kind of scenarios. That snuck Baron and the way that CJ just kind of gave it to them for free, that was the death knell for me, because you just can't play after that point.
And so the Aphelios, Azir, Hecarim, Jace comp, like, they
Siege.
look at a Baron and go, The only
disappears.
champion they could get it faster would be, like, Tristana?
Cassiopeia.
Kaisa, maybe?
Cassiopeia is like the one
Cassiopeia.
champion that will
yeah.
shred it quicker. I'm trying to
Get
think of this.
Cassiopeia top there to add into those three. Like
No,
it's-
that being said, actually, because it's a Leandri's first Azir, it's not. It's actually Azir and Cassiopeia are the two fastest Baron takers from mid lane in the game. Aphelios,
Leandri's
when you
dash
have
is very
Calibrum,
quick.
that's the fastest bot lane taker
You
in the
mean
game,
Crescendo?
because even more than Vayne, actually. But just because like you get that.
That was just a small counterpoint. Let's not
But,
inject too hard.
But actually, just saying that though, Sengoku realized, wait, we have one of the fastest Baron takes in the game. We can shred this, and CJ are like, oh, fuck
It was
me,
like
we just
15
threw the game.
seconds, it was up and
huge.
then gone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And
they
then,
didn't
like,
get in range to steal at all.
Well, it's also because they got two items on Aphelios really early. Like real early, and then there's a Leandri's on Azir, which is good secondary at that point, and Aphelios had the right items, and even like we were talking about that fight just before the Ocean Drake one, right? Like, you still the only person who survived from CGA, the only person was Milan, who as an AD carry with no summoners and no ult has no way to even think about putting a ward in there, especially if the blue trinket's down. So like it's not like it's the Rel or the Gnar or even like the Graves or the Zoe. You've got a little
really
bit
low
more
HP too, so had to reset. So
Yeah.
everyone's resetting anyway.
So yes, the fight was close, but the key people died, and Milan can't go and ward. So you're dark with no way of getting more vision out. So on the reset, you're just too slow.
But then you don't also
your
go
window
bot.
to get there is just not fast. Well, there.
You also don't go
That
bot.
too. That
I
too.
think, I'll be honest, this first Baron felt very much like the veterancy of
Yeah.
the side of Sengoku coming out huge, and just like, I'm not super sure personally, because I've tried listening to a bit of the comm stuff, but I don't really know a lot of the players' voices just by default, and following in Japanese when it's a language you barely know can be difficult. I don't know who the shot caller is. Whoever the shot caller is on Sengoku, like,
Really on it.
Yeah, I
like,
have to
they
say,
just single-handedly made the call to just end the game basically at the 20-minute mark on
I'd
that
say
Baron.
what we've seen more and more, particularly from the best teams in the world, is we don't tend to see singular shot callers anymore. It's a lot of delegation. For instance, what you used to have.
Well, we know
is,
DFM, it goes Steel, Eddie.
Yeah,
Like, that is the two
like,
shot callers in the
so-
team, with
so,
Dango leading up the charge.
What you tend to do is delegate it between who's shot calling in team fights, particularly when you're on certain champions. If you're on a Rel, you have to shot call. You just have to be the shot caller on Rel. You don't because you go in
Everyone
so
follows
quickly
you.
and effectively. Everyone has to follow your lead, right? Particularly with junglers, you will be doing the early game stuff, particularly because like you're doing.
once you pass them.
However, sometimes you'll have I don't know, like say Odoamne when they were on Rogue. Remember that time when Schalke tried to lane swap versus them last year, and then we saw V3 do it and just do it better than that was great. But Odoamne was on the receiving end of it. It was like, wait, I'm just gonna roll swap. I'm just gonna shot call the lane swap because I know all this stuff. Sometimes certain players just have certain skill sets which is really good for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, either way, whoever called that Baron, as you're saying, Lexi, huge fucking call because that just lost CJ the game. I do genuinely think CJ were in a winning position. After that, can't do anything. That's
or at least if they're not necessarily in a winning, even if they're not necessarily in a winning position, they're in a competitive position, right?
Well, things are actually
right?
Zoe is one of the better answers into Aphelios. In an even game state, when Zoe gets to stand and fight, one bubble puts Aphelios out of the game. Like that's one of the few things which can actually deal with Aphelios. Same with Azir actually. This is why Zoe was really good in this comp. Like, wait, Zoe can actually carry in this comp. This is really important for CJ. And then you lose your mid lane turret, and then you lose all of your vision, and suddenly you don't get to have the same impacts. And that was the straw which broke CJ's back.
And I also call, actually, Hecarim and Jace are also relatively good into Zoe in turn, because Jace aims a shock blast where Zoe's going back, and Hecarim just charges where she's going. So it's like there are ways and answers for both these teams to work. It was the most competitive game by a long way. But what I will
Why
also
we spent
say
so much
is
time on this game.
I think this is the one, but we have to spend time on the others. We can just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. But this one,
But what I'll also say is Sengoku was significantly more decisive about playing through their win condition, because CGA basically decided that punishing the Jace was how they were going to get into the game. But I'm not necessarily sure how much of a win condition that was, unless you could get Cass in so far ahead he just blows people up. Like he went for the Gale Force build on the Graves. He did get early advantages, but you've got the Jace behind. But you're trading that for Aphelios with first tower all plates. Like, so Sengoku have gone like, okay, well Jace is just gonna be able to farm and be useful. Like he still put out like equivalent damage to the Aphelios and the Azir by like a couple hundred. They both did around just over 17k between all the carries.
Well, and you can't leave a Jace alone in a lane either. He will just destroy a turret.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
the moment he hits
ahead,
two items,
well, that's if they're ahead, because I think CGA kind of like ended up like nullifying that by again just getting like they dove Paz under his tier 2 turret in bot side.
They did in the bot side. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I think that CGA kind of like I think the problem was Sengoku, while they were trying to play strong side on both sides of the map, it did end up meaning that Sengoku had to like win conditions from that, and and CJ only had so many resources to put topside, while knowing that if resources were put topside, Milan Alchemy are just going to get put in the dumpster. So I think Sengoku, again, I think they had themselves a lot of. I think this draft makes sense from a kind of a player perspective, just knowing that Sengoku are going to win naturally through. I mean, Fellow Social is a disgusting 2v2 with Gango and NT though. Like they're probably the most destructive 2v2 in terms of getting themselves ahead.
Plus, I think there's a sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation here. It's like, okay, so either we leave the Aphelios Thresh alone, and it's Gango and NT versus Milan and Alchemy, and Milan and Alchemy aren't that great in lane, and then Gango and NT level them vis-a-vis most of this series. Or we leave a Jace alone with the Gnar, and Hecarim comes up and punishes as well, and we get a Jace split pushing an Aphelios that just has to not die and will scale up 30 minutes and be fine. And effectively what happened was that they basically, okay, well, we'll put Jace behind, and he was still, like, he wasn't strong, but he was at least useful, mildly speaking. And on the other side, you've got this Aphelios, which, like, but got so fed so early that actually he was able to stand and fight when otherwise he would have just died. And I'm not sure CGA, at least in the mid game, kind of had the same win conditions online. Like, you had Nathan who was strong, but then the moment that mid tower goes down, that win condition dies a little bit.
I'd like to have us go a little bit further on throughout the game, if we may, because we've talked around that early part, we've talked around the mid game part. I mean, the thing is, once that Baron was taken, the game was kind of over because, like, let's be real, they pushed a little bit, and it's that ace. It's the ace that they got with that push that well and truly ended the game. There was a chance, and there were definitely opportunities. If Crest Gaming Act didn't get aced, that they had an opportunity. They didn't need to fight around the prep around the Dragon Pit, which is partly what they were doing. They were trying to protect build vision. They got caught out. They even played that fight, if I'm remembering everything correctly about that game. It was a 4v5 in favor of CGA in that fight. And then they couldn't even do it. Ramune got a huge shuffle off in this fight, which ended up really nullifying a lot. Nathan couldn't land a sleepy trouble bubble to save his life.
It was just too fast paced at that
died
point.
Before he could even ult, if I remember rightly, and it felt a little sad to watch that fight because it felt so close up till that point.
Yeah, so to put it into context, after the Baron went down, CJ had 1 kill. 1 kill between then and the end of the game. They just got completely shut out. And I think, I mean, they did try and fight around that dragon, you're right, and that was kind of it. Goodbye, CJ. Yep. You didn't find it at the right point. You couldn't find it. And in fairness, it was a hard time to try and find a fight, and that's why we're saying, oh yeah, well, lights are kind of out now. They did try and look
why we
for
talked
it,
about
but...
everything before
exactly. Because after this point, it's kind of the term which I've kept going back to. It's just a formality after that point. Like, it's so unlikely you're going to find the end game fight because it's just very difficult. Anyway, I mean, Sangok just put him to the sword after that.
So, gentlemen, and partly more towards Sam, actually, technically, as you also, you and me have done game design courses that we have finished, and Nymaera, you're still currently going through yours, so I can...
I'm literally, for tomorrow, I have to get a game design document in, like, that's my coursework. I'm literally in that mindset right now.
Literally in it. So, gentlemen, I just want to take this way, because it's an interesting point, and I've been watching it, and we've been talking about this formality, and the games that I have been doing from a data point of view feel very much you can figure out a game if the game's over at the 15-minute mark, just because of a lot of raw stats in the team if you're doing it. Has Riot balanced the game to basically always find an endpoint for the quote-unquote better team? Because of how important the early game is, because they don't want to go back to a 45-minute game timer where maybe the quote-unquote better team can lose the early game and then win the late game? It's an interesting question. I'm going to just ask it here because the next two games, ladies and gentlemen, we won't be talking about much.
So I'll talk two mechanics here, and of course Al as well. He's you're way up in.
You could see his face if you're watching the podcast.
Been thinking, thinks pretty highly about, thinks fairly in depth about the game. So I'm sure he has his own thoughts, but
particularly on League,
yeah, two mechanics in League specifically that have been put in partly to sort of counteract stalling is turret plates help snowball games. If you snowball early, plates get you so far ahead you can just close games out super early. You just get so much gold onto certain people, and then they just get items far earlier. Game's kind of done from there. Second thing is effectively, you look at how powerful Uber buffs are in the late game at this point, and how much gold and stats they give you, and it's very hard to stall out through that.
I mean,
Baron
if
buff
I
is
may,
strong,
Sam,
but Elder just kills people.
Didn't you retweet something, Sam, around if Baron faced off against Elder Drake?
Yeah.
Yeah, you retweeted this. So
Baron literally can't
creatures.
damage. But Baron can't actually damage Elder Dragon because the HP.
Oh no, so that's one thing, but because of Baron's debuff, where if you're the first person hitting it, you do half damage to it. You actually can solo Elder Dragon when you can't solo Baron most of the time. I know, yeah. So Sam, in terms of like those Uber buffs, I absolutely agree. I will say though, it does feel like souls themselves are not quite as damning as they were in 2020. I think that souls this year are slight, because like Ocean Soul matters when you have better target accessibility and range than the other team. Because if you can't start hitting people, you never get that active. And most of the time, you get burst out at that point in the game. It's the Vladimir problem, right? You have a level 13 Vladimir, shit hot, crazy. Goes into the backline, has second tier ultimate, both of his really big damaging abilities maxed out. Level 17, 18 Vladimir, though, if you have like a half-second misstep, you get CC'd and you immediately die in the duration of the CC. In mid-game, it's a bit more forgiving because the damage isn't there yet. Same thing with Ocean Soul. You can be doing damage, but in the late game, in like the uber late game, actually the souls
don't already carrying badges you. Yeah.
You just kind of die before they become relevant. Elder and Baron, they have slightly more wide applications, which make it slightly easier to end the game in those ways, though. So I'd say like in some ways you're right, but I think like it has to be like the very late game objectives for that in terms of, and I know that Riot were actually addressing comeback mechanics in a recent blog post too. So I'm interested to see like what they're doing with that, because I think for me the core issue is when someone has a lead, how easy is it to access that person with a lead? How easy is it to remove them, right? Because when you've got champions like Tahm Kench, Thresh back in the meta, Sion's coming back, and you have AD carries which have stuff like Gale Force and whatever, I actually think a lot of these AD carries really fucking hard to remove from the game, and that means that the comebacks are very hard to seal.
Yeah, it's just an interesting observation. I mean, obviously Riot have a very difficult task ahead of them because most of their player base, no, actually, all of their player base, outside of the few hundred that get to play on a competitive stage on a regular basis, aren't affected by this problem because the comeback mechanic is built more for solo queue because that's where everybody plays. And currently, Riot are actually pretty happy. They're just really frustrated, from my understanding, when they get to the 35-minute mark and they're like, shit, program was actually over in 15 minutes. We're just kind of going through stuff and it's not entertaining to watch because guess what? LOL Esports is in a really weird place right now because well, losing a bunch of more money and everything through recent events, which I'm not going to go too deep into here, but LOL Esports viewership is in a weird place, and I wonder if 15-minute games where it feels like it's already over that you have to watch another 15 minutes for.
So part of that is how good is your team. So actually, because there's also an element of can you close? Are you confident enough to close out the lead you have? So if you look at, who's a really good example? Down one, for example, some of the higher end LPL teams. So I'm looking at like say RNG, EDG, Top when they're on form, IG when they're on form, even the likes of C9 and particularly say G2, really good example from the LEC, are actually very efficient and ruthless with the lead. They will close out very, very quickly and kind of keep the snowball rolling. There are other teams who are sort of like that, sort of just like above mid, but not quite the top 2 or 3.
Sure.
That kind of, I don't know, 5-4, maybe 3 part of leagues around the world are not as confident about closing out from tier 2s on. And it slows the game down because they don't snowball with their leaders. They'll get the lead, but then they won't snowball as hard as
I
they
would
could.
really suggest watching Casual's content on taking tier 2 turrets, because it's in terms of like the short shift, long shift mechanic, in terms of like, yes, between the outer turrets, it's easy to go from one lane, push it in, into a second lane, push it in. Because the distance between inner turrets is so much shorter, you actually have to go like flow down the map, set up waves, you go top, mid, bot, you push people around, and finally when you get to that third lane, you have a chance to actually hit the turret. That's a little, yeah, so in terms of closing out the game from tier 2, that's one thing. In terms of like Lexi's initial question is like, are games just over at the 15-minute mark? I think game 1 was one of those where actually it wasn't. That was a really cool thing to see. But think about the biggest comebacks in LoL Esports history. I'm thinking of the Rox versus G2 match back in Season 6 with that huge Smeb Cannonal. I'm thinking of SKT...
G-Bay just did a whole video on this, right?
Yeah,
so good.
And I think another one would be SKT EDG with that huge Rakan Tori combo. I think one of the things is, like, a lot of the people who... Look at those champions which can do that, right? Kennen doesn't one-shot teams anymore. Orianna doesn't one-shot teams anymore. The age of Wombo is very, very much in a weird state, because a lot of the time, you actually Wombo onto one person rather than the whole team. Because it's like, if you just get that one person with the lead, that's the actual issue, rather than killing off everyone. I actually don't know if early damage is high enough to have these crazy... Because if you can actually one-shot a team at 3 items, and then do that by foregoing a defensive item, you have these kind of comeback Wombo mechanics. I'm not really sure that's in the game anymore, particularly with, you know, like Lee Sin and these huge playmakers from jungle not being as powerful as well, not having, you know, like Kiana jungles. Like that was in Season 8, I think there was comeback mechanics too, right? I'm not sure there are from that role anymore.
I mean, I will say people like Hecarim, there's a reason people keep playing Hecarim and Lilia is because you do have the ability to both farm very fast, scale pretty well, and then have both Lilting Lullaby and Onslaught of Shadows, which does give you access to targets you might not otherwise. A Swell Sealed lands on the right target from the right flank, Lilting Lullaby comes through, and you can get access to that Aphelios you wouldn't otherwise do. Onslaught of Shadows, you can just ignore CC and fly right over the backline. With your Ghost and your 3,000 move speed you get from FaZe, Roche, Chem Tank, and Ghost all popped at once, and you can access the backline. So there is like 1 or 2, but it's not guaranteed, and there is a reason why it is, say, Rel plus Hecarim plus Ori that dive at the single target. That's like, and the reason you're diving at that single target in some ways is because, you know, we mentioned people get funneled a lot of gold early. Like, okay, this Aphelios, who's our win condition, has all plates plus, you know, 3 waves of farm more than everybody else. If you kill them, then maybe you got a way to come back. But it's like, I do kind of agree. It's not the same style of Wombo where it is just murder everybody at once.
It also just doesn't feel like when there's a lead, like I don't really feel like, compared to even just last season, gentlemen, it felt like there was still more opportunities for teams to come back, partly because one of them I'll use just to kind of emphasize this, Soul felt more important. I completely agree with you both on that point. Soul always felt like an option that any team could come back and win with. At this point, I'm now like, Soul is still very good, but it's not kind of, oh, a team is like 3 or 4k gold behind, maybe 5k gold, and then the Soul can at least catch them back up. It feels like we're kind of past that point, and now these new items and everything are kind of hyper accelerating those that are already getting the leads, because they get their mythic completed first, which just accelerates the game further in their favor.
What I'll also say is, if you have there is quite often where you get the situation where the team has the lead and the dragon stack,
gets everything,
and so at which point that's not even the win condition, because then effectively what is stalling the game out is basically saying, I am on 2 dragons, I am on 2 dragons, you have 0. I have map control. You can't play for Soul, and we get to Soul Point, and then basically ever after that, it's a bleed out where one team has to come and fight you at a massive disadvantage around the Soul Point. And of course, that's part of early game snowball, and teams honestly should probably be cleaning up faster from forcing teams to these difficult positions. But at the same time, there can be this kind of
not want to overstep, right?
There were this kind of downtime at sort of, say, Drake 2, maybe Drake 3, where teams might not come and fight and just say, we'll leave that alone. And you don't have people coming to sort of like commit honorable suicide at Dragon Pit. Like, they just let it happen. And they'll just bleed out a bit slower.
What were you going to say, Alex?
I was basically going to just kind of follow on that point which initially I was saying in terms of like, it feels like, and this kind of keys back towards, and again, we're wrapping this all up, I suppose, in terms of like,
we are,
is the game over at 15 minutes? In a lot of ways, yes, because the people who are winning the map also get Herald, also get Dragon, and guess what? They get the plates off that too. This is why it's so awkward, for these teams which are so proficient at being ahead.
Money.
Just kind of close out the game because they're sat there with everything in their pocket saying, well, I don't actually need to fight you in the next couple of minutes because I'm just waiting on the next objective timer, and there's no there's I think the big thing for me, and this also happens in the LJL a lot, there's no incentive to fight when there's not an objective. Which is kind of the point of team play League of Legends, right? In solo queue, you just fight all the time. But in pro play,
absolutely.
it feels like towers themselves are not always worth it. Plates are, but a lot of time towers aren't. But then you're just waiting till the next Dragon or Herald spawn. Of course, Baron too.
Unless you're Astralis versus Mad Lions, and then you literally want to go for the bloodiest game ever. But no, I completely agree. It definitely puts a lot of games in an awkward spot, and I think you're right with that analysis, Nymaera.
Difficult philosophical conversations.
Weird place to put it, but hey, it was something that we had been murmuring and talking about between the three of us and other points and broadcasts, and I thought, hey, this seems like a perfect game to bring it up because, hey, it wasn't quite 15 minutes, but once it kind of felt over, it was another 5-6 minutes of just kind of going through the motions once that ace happened.
Yeah.
Which hilariously, at 20-minute mark, the game still took another 10 minutes to actually end. So kind of works. Anyway, gentlemen, let's go on to game number 2. This is where the wheels really started to fall off. This is where I told one of my players that they are never allowed to play Nocturne Top, no matter how much they would like that, because Nocturne Top's not good, okay? Just because Kaiser does it, just because Nap does it, doesn't mean you can do it, all right? Just chill out. This game...
Did I do it too once?
It's been turning up a little bit more often recently.
Yeah, and they're all losing with it, so don't play it.
Schalke did it versus XL. They had Nocturne mid and Carthus jungle and pressed R on the AD carry, and that worked.
Yeah.
But yes, this was one of those games again where it was a different draft out of CJ trying to throw a curveball, and the curveball landed real flat. Gango and NT
that again
broke Milan and Alchemy because Crash just got to walk through the enemy jungle off vision the entire time and gank around them for two kills onto the bot lane. And burning their summoners. Milan tried to flash and heal and still died. And then Gango and NT double killed them moments later, and they've died twice.
I'll tell you exactly where this game ended. It was CJ invading and getting Kassin something, but then also Kassin failed to leash the Gromp properly. And then somehow Milan and Alchemy freaking see Crash on bot side of the map. They push up into the midpoint of the lane. They Crash comes through Tribrush and they're not backed off, and then they just die. That's horrible lane management. That's horrible wave management. I just lost it when that happened.
They spot him for a brief moment, but basically bot river near mid lane bush. He then dives past Raptors and wraps his way right the way around. And okay, he must be farming something in our jungle. But he just does it. He just walks to bot lane and ganks him, and they're just far too overeager to keep playing.
Even the way that they were standing, the two bot laners from Crest Gaming Act, they couldn't disengage and NT going in because he managed to get the flash knockup. Not the flash knockup, but the stun into the knockup, which meant that complete CC lock was
there. You go.
Yeah, exactly.
Crash down.
Because you can at least try and flay the rel out of that. That's one of the things you can do about. But it just felt like Milan Alchemy just didn't understand that Kassin was not there to bail them out, could not turn around that play, even though actually I think they had an okay 2v2 situation before. And again, they just invaded before, and it felt like Kassin was going to start punishing Crash once more. And then CJ just lost in the bot lane, and then, heck, it happened again a load of times this game. The CJ's bot lane were just horribly mispositioning. Most of this game was bot diff. I do think the Nocturne Top has niche applications. Particularly with Equalizer and collateral damage.
I think.
And also, again, it's just the backline access thing we're talking about in terms of, if you can hit the person with the lead, maybe you can start playing around stuff. But, CJ just, the wheels came off, as you rightly said, way before this was ever going to be a factor. It was pretty hard to watch, actually. Just, difficult to cast.
And it was also those things where, you're really wanting your solo lanes to hit level 6. You've got a Rumble mid and a Nocturne top. You really want them to hit level 6 and not have everything on fire before that point. By the time Nocturne hits level 6, they are down 3.2k. It's not even 10 minutes. and then finally knocks in its level 6 and gets to solo kill Paz. Hooray! But you're already down 3,000 gold. It's not even 10 minutes. Your bot lane is like worse than caster minions. Like, it's a bad, bad sign. And like, if you are going to draft a comp like this that is level 6 dependent, as pull off this early game plan, which is supposed to get Cassian ahead, you cannot in the lane. Good grief. Like, you just upended any chance of playing to what your comp is supposed to do at that point, because you're never going to be in a position to play the way you want to. And then, like, they get one decent turnaround fight where Sengoku tried to dive bot lane tier 1 and int it away, and Milan gets 2 kills, and you think maybe they can come back in. But that's literally the only bright spot I can think of for CGA in this game, outside of the Nap solo kill. Neither of these plays amounted to anything aside from, like, some feel-good vibes.
The fact that we saw by the 9-minute mark that Sengoku Gaming were 3.2k ahead, I was going. You know, when you talked about the 4 kills that Crest Gaming that Sengoku got initialized over CGA, and then they get the dragon as well. I stopped even bothering writing notes for this game at that point. I just saw this game and I was like, it's over.
That was awful. That was awful.
It's actually over. The fact that they also just kept going in 1v1 at some point, it was just like, what are you doing? Like, I started freaking out going, this is just not the Crest Gaming Act I knew.
Yeah, they had.
This is not Aria's Crest Gaming Act. That's definitely for sure.
A horrible equalizer. They had Jinx and Thresh cut off from the rest of the team, and then Lantern Jinx through the team. That's how weird the positioning was, right?
So bad.
Yeah.
And then also,
Awkward.
Nocturne just wasn't there. That's the fight where Nap needs to get involved. You know, that's the fight where you need to make sure that Gango is, like, got his dancing shoes on.
But he kills Paz in a 1v1 after the fight.
Doesn't fucking matter! It doesn't matter! At some point...
Right?
You know, you just lose so hard in that dragon fight. It's inconsequential. I think that fight again was Milan and Alchemy choosing some really bad pathing. I think that it was
Like,
it was
gets
kind
worse
of
because you know what makes worse about that plane specifically. You know, Milan checked the bush with a zap and spotted people in the bush and still
walked
walked
into
that
it.
way.
Yeah.
Still walked that way. Like not to take away from your point, but I just want to add that in there because it was really egregious.
It was,
really egregious.
and then when you also capping that off, have just a really bad equalizer that doesn't end the fight early enough, and then you know there's a shockwave coming from behind you because Ramana, even though they got the second roam, that doesn't matter. Actually, in this case, it works out because it corrals them, right? But Nap had teleport, had ult at that point. You can even do the thing where you ult teleport because you can't teleport onto a ward then at that point because you can't see them as Paz. You can stop the Gnar coming in, and then you can ult in after that point. There are some techniques you can use. It just seemed like at this point, CJ just got completely mental boomed. Like, that just awful at that point. And don't get me wrong, Sengoku played the fights really well. They just left no opening to be exposed, but then just, like,
But CGA but the thing is, Sengoku stepped into the ring, CGA were still on the ropes. Like, that was the problem. Like, it wasn't like CGA
I don't even
were
think
throwing
CJ were on the ropes. I thought they were outside the boxing ring and put their coach in instead of them. Like, it felt rough to watch.
Something, Undertaker throwing Mankind.
Something.
Through one of the announced deck off. Hell in a Cell. I can't remember the whole meme. Anyway, you know the point.
Basically that, yeah.
So, some of these words happened in some order. It sounded something like that.
Well, it was very much more the something because CGA were being thrown this whole time over and over again. And gentlemen, we could easily keep talking about this game, but honestly, that's the only thing of really note to talk about this game, because we've already talked about the one shining moment that Crest Gaming Act had. We've talked about how the game was already over before Crest Gaming Act had their shining moment. And I don't really think there's anything else to say. Sengoku just took all the objectives and just ended the game at 26 minutes. It was a very quick game after that one.
Yep.
Shall we go on to the third one?
One last thing. Gango played this game really, really well. Just Gango's kiting was absurd this game. That's the one thing I'll say. Because I know we've ragged on CJ like a lot for this game. And they kind of deserve it. We're normally very kind to our teams in terms of like giving them, you know, the benefit of the doubt, giving them, you know, the bright side. But like Sengoku played really well in terms of individually this game, honestly. Gango and NC just completely crapped on this game. Like, congrats to the bot lane again. Sengoku just completely bot diffed.
Fair.
Yeah. Game number 3. So we know how we said there was one shining moment for Crest Gaming Act. I think the lights turned off. I think Crest Gaming Act said, nah, we're going home, guys. They actually turned the lights off. They didn't even bother looking at their computers. They put bots to play the map for them, and it kind of felt like a bit like a bot game. I'm being rude here, but this was the worst game out of all of them. It was also the fastest game out of all of them.
Yes.
And after game 2, if anyone thought my predictions were probably going to be right, this the first few minutes of this one was the nail in the coffin.
Yep.
Who wants to take this one? Who wants to take this sad one first?
Go forth, Nymaera.
I think
I don't even want it.
This game was effectively sealed in about 3 plays. So
yeah,
this really felt like, again, you know, like in terms of like, you know, sense like, is a game over at this point? In chess, you keep, you know, there are some points where you keep playing it out knowing that it's inevitably going to happen because the rules of the game are, you know, they constrain you to certain actions. In League, there's a little bit more flux and gray area just because things are, you know, not quite as certain in moves and stuff like that. But as you can see on the scoreboard, Rise got a lot of gold. Like a lot of gold. This was, and a lot of this started from the fact that, so 2v2 went initially the way of Sengoku. They got a 2v2. And then things turned around for another one in terms of the other way, actually. So 2v2 was actually like somehow better for the side of CJ than it had been the whole series. But they also weren't getting, but they also weren't getting out on the map. It was still being pushed in. It was still really awkward for them. Where this game was actually sealed was 2 plays in mid and top. The first one was Nation and Kasin trying to pick off Ramune, crashes there in the brush. So Ney slides and glides into the bot side river brush because they're playing from blue side and finds an Udyr there. They try and get extra damage onto Ramune, who just gets out. I don't think he even needs to burn himself a flash or anything. One of the reasons this is so bad in terms of why did this play not work out in that way, even though you know, like you've got 2 high damage champions trying to all in this Rise early on. So Nathan had gone for the lethal tempo. That means you're scaling into team fights, and actually at that point you don't win laning phase that hard versus Rise because he has better wave shove than you in a lot of ways too when you get to like level 3, level 4. Although actually coming on to the next couple of patches when his ears got like his soldier damage down, that's actually gonna be a very hard matchup for him now. Anyway, maybe just a bit of a precursor.
Because ears drops off personally, but
there are matchups where he'll be fine. He's not as OP as he was because his lane control is not going to be as like uncontested as it was before. Particularly into stuff like Orianna and Rise, he's not going to get that same prio he used to, and that's a problem because that affects your junglers. Junglers are very important in the game right now. That all follows on from each other. However, he's still a very strong team fighting.
Xin Zhao. But sorry, yes, I agree.
Oh my god, have you seen the range of his E? It's literally
stupid.
It's
actually dumb.
His E is actually the same. It's like the same range as like effectively a Nocturne rank 1 ult or a Nidalee Spear.
Yeah, like
it's
you
absurd.
You call it audacious charge. That's not a charge. That's like a flipping like
it's
that's
what
like
it
a marathon.
It tells you how much we don't really want to talk about this game because we're talking about Xin Zhao and stuff which hasn't even been released yet. So effectively what happened was Nation went in for this shuffle onto Ramune and then found Crash in the bush. They hadn't poked out Ramune because there was no comment on the Azir. There was lethal tempo, which meant that Ramune started this fight a lot of HP. He'd had a fine laning phase. And then Ramune gets out and Nation, for some reason, paths back, not kind of like in a safe way in terms of the way, kind of down through the river and then back to his own turret, but paths back through the midway, like the center of mid lane. Gets flashed on for a rune by Crash on the Udyr and just dies. Also, you know that whole thing about the bot lane 2v2 kind of working out both ways, but actually, oh sure, okay, kills either way, but priority gone over to Sengoku. NT uses this to roam mid and get a second kill into Kasin. Ramune, Ramune picks up a double kill from there, both of them. Then top lane, another double kill comes through a couple of minutes later.
Yeah,
just all over the map, right? Go on, Initia1ise.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, the reason Nation couldn't roam through river is because he saw NT roaming up to mid, so couldn't go that
He
way.
had enough time to do it at that point. At that point, he did.
I'll take it off.
Because you
trust
still,
the mid laner.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the position. I think that was poor communication from CJ. I'm just sat there. I'm like, you know that they're missing, but you still know that there's a flash on the Udyr. It was anyway poorly managed.
Yeah, but basically, so Ramune gets a double kill mid. They then roam bot. They dive bot. They get a double kill bot. They then go top. They get a double kill top.
At that point, this is a Rise that's got 4-0 and
he's 6-0. He goes 6-0.
No. Yeah, but like what you just said, after the double kill, he's 4-0. And gentlemen, I believe this was like the 10-minute mark.
Yeah.
He has this. That's not okay. Go ahead, Initia1ise. I just wanted to really emphasize how far he was when he got the second double kill.
Yeah, and then effectively at this point, they finally find something top lane. Pass is a bit overextended, and Kassin tries to run him down top. And the problem is, it takes him so long to get him that Ramone turns up, gets the Olaf, and then kills the Sion straight after as well. And it's like, okay, we
And the
now have
turret.
a... Yeah, at this point, this Rise is 6-0-0, has got vast amounts more farming gold than anybody else on the map, and you go, okay.
Oh, we got 2 turrets in that exchange.
Yeah, and at this point, you go, okay, so we have a Kai'Sa that's now kind of recovered from an even laning phase and is doing just fine, and we got a Rise in a side lane that nobody can match. Like
That
this
was
Sion is
3k ahead.
yeah, and like at this point, well, Sion is basically built for the top 2v2 matchup, understandably, which would have been Gnar in lane, which is AD, and the UD, which is mainly, it was going to be mostly AD. So he built full armor. If you look at his, like,
at least Frostfire gives you some.
But yeah, he's got Frostfire, Bramble, Steel Caps, so it's mostly armor. And and then he's got the other side. He's got this Rise, it's 2 items. Like, Sion can't lane against him. We know that Azir is way behind. He's never going to be able to lane against him. He's got lethal tempo anyway, so can't poke him out either. So Rise is uncontested in the side lane, and like your main laners are just miles and miles and miles behind.
I'll also say the other thing is that so this play which led to the huge the 2 towers going down with the Herald being used again from Sengoku. What? Sorry, not again, but using the Herald in that play, and then Rise coming out at that 6-0. This started with Kassin and Nap trying to punish Paz on the Gnar. That's not a lane you play through. I don't know why you're using ults and flashes to kill a Gnar when actually you could be using that to shut down the Rise in mid lane. Roam mid lane for that. Get Nap to ult right down there. Killing the Gnar at that point. Not only is it not worth that much, it's risky because of exactly what happened, because you've lost your mid priority, because again, you can't poke out the Rise, Azir's not winning that lane. Crash Ramone come up top and it's like, well, shit, we've just completely dug our own grave yet again. It's the wrong play to make. You can't play through top in this kind of draft. You just can't.
I don't know why you would ever even try and play through a Sion top lane. We saw Paz literally
Not when it's already
playing
that far
it
down.
Exactly, right? And we saw
Yeah.
Paz on purposely play that champion specifically because you don't play through him, but he has the opportunity to still be impactful on the map and just what he can offer to the team. And then I don't know. This felt really bad. I don't want to keep bashing on Crest Gaming.
I tell you what you can do is use Azir's early priority if you take Comet and poke out. Mostly, I'm not a fan of Comet, but because right now early priority is so important for junglers, you push out with the Azir and you dive top. At that point, the Gnar suddenly is a lot less valuable. But once you start getting plates, send Nap like into the absolute dumpster, then like there's no point playing through the Sion. He just has to hold lane. But yeah, I think CJ came in with like bad game plans and got punished accordingly for it. So
yeah, exactly. Like you play through Sion if you've got a jungler and a mid laner you want to get fed, basically, because Sion offers a great amount of setup and can dive and won't die. Like, and then basically it's like, okay, so I'm running, I don't know, a Graves or a Kindred or a Kayn, as we saw Hachimecha do. Maybe then you can do it because you've got set up for this carry jungler to get fired, or maybe you can roam up your Azir or your Rise to do the exact same deal. But that's kind of it. And then effectively also, like, I suppose to give credit over to Sengoku Gaming as well, this is the game where we see Ramone get to be the Ramone we'd kind of been waiting for a couple of years now. He had a great game. It's also the first game I've seen in a long, long time where Sengoku kind of played through Ramone. A little bit, of course, was counter-ganking and stuff for the rest of it, but largely they've kind of left Ramone on an island in mid lane and played through their side lanes one way or another.
I'll be honest,
this was one where they got to play through the Rise and made it look real good.
I'll be honest, though, I'm still not sold on Ramone. I'm still not quite sold on him. Having one carry game and this feeling like the one true carry game from Ramone, all split so far, makes me feel a little bit, I don't know. I'm still a bit I'm still hesitant to be like he's quite back there. I'm still like I'm still in my eyes. I'm like what Arya, Ace, Recap, even Dasher in my eyes is still higher. And like in my eyes, I would argue that Nation was better, but I mean Ramone prevented Nation from finding leads and a lot of other stuff like that. So he's doing his job at least. It's very much feels like Ace from V3 of last year, where he rarely won, but he was okay.
We can definitely power rank these laners, but I think I think Ramone isn't above mid tier. He needs more than one good series for that because his bot lane is so far ahead. You can't disconnect players from their teams. I think that Nation was on an individual level, like maybe slightly better than Ramone this series, besides that last game, right? I think that Ramone was good this series, though. I don't think he was bad. I think that's better than he's done in the regular split. I think these are the best games Ramone's had this split. But then the question is that going to last?
Yeah, I mean, like,
you
that's
got to put it into
I guess
context,
that's,
right?
yeah. I mean, that's kind of my point. Like, the guy died once across 3 games. He had a carry performance in the third. And more what I'm saying is like, okay, so this is a bit better. I still have issues with how disconnected he is from the team. Like, his kill
course, yeah.
participation as a mid
Well,
laner
do you guys want to
is
do
still
like
a
a
bit
player
low.
of the
That's because
series?
it's like
or-
some 2v2s low. Sure, like, what's the first one to finish
Yeah.
the point? But I guess what I'm trying to say, particularly for that third game, is it's nice to see Sengoku play through mid for the first time this season and show that they can do it at least. Like, it's like, even if it's the one game, the fact that they can do it, and that was against CGA's alleged strength, right, which was the mid jungle 2v2, and kind of course, Cassim was a bit tilted at this point and all the rest of it. But it's still another look for Sengoku, which if they do want to push further in the playoffs, they'll need to show again. And it's at least a good sign, even if I completely agree with you. I want to see more from the guy before we start saying he's back. If you see what I mean.
Yes, absolutely,
Voldemort,
absolutely.
he's back.
Gentlemen, as Nymaera came up with the idea for our player of the series, let's quickly do this as we are now at the end of all of the 3 games before we start prepping you lovely ladies and gentlemen for V3 versus the Fukuoka Hawks and our speculation and a bit of a recap on their previous games. Gentlemen, I'm going to go to Nymaera first as he had the idea for this. Who is your player of the series?
It's got to be Gango. Gango crushed. He's absolutely absurd. You know, you can give him pretty much, you know, he's playing champions which are hard to pull off sometimes, like the FLS. He's doing it with a cull. And yeah, he was against players which are probably weaker pound for pound than the rest of the members of CGA. But that is no, like, that still doesn't just excuse Gango, like, destroying team fights as well. This guy is just, he will win you games on his own.
Okay, so Gango for Nymaera. Initialize, who are you going with?
Seconding that Gango nomination. Dude was just ridiculously good across 3 games. They crushed every single game. What can you say? Dude's a monster.
I have to concur. He was just the best player by a country mile for Sengoku. And this was a performance from Gango that we always knew he could have had. We've been wanting to see more of this. Obviously, Sengoku Gaming had a pretty distressing beginning to their split, but they've well and truly started to flourish afterwards. Obviously, starting 1 and 3. Well, 2 and 4 really during week 3, and then to pull it back. Yes, okay, they were tying with V3 at the end, but their V3 tiebreaker match was one-sided, and it's only been up and up really from Sengoku Gaming, and I think Gango is one of those players that is part of that up and up. They've definitely, I would argue, would you guys think he's been pulled back a little bit from how aggressive he likes to play? Because I feel like he's less aggressive and he's a bit more calculated.
A bit more restrained, particularly in laning phase in terms of awareness of the map. We've not seen the other side of Gango where he gets caught being on weak side of the map. Actually, he's punished teams who've tried to, like, put him under the cosh on the bot side of the map. That Burning Core game, he absolutely crapped on those fools. They had Ezreal Karma pushing them in with vertical jungling level 1. He just turns around and says, actually, no, I'm going to out-trade you, and now you can't go for that. And that's while also, like, you know, he's just hasn't been caught out in the same way he was in 2020. It's been a huge improvement. And that's really, for me, what makes Sengoku such a scary team. They don't actually have that Achilles heel in that bot lane anymore, which is how they kind of fell apart when they were strong on CGA in summer.
Yeah.
I would agree.
I think I'll add a little bit onto that one. Is actually, I think people like Crash being very good at tracking the enemy jungler has really helped that, because it's not like there was an element on CJ of just the blind pushing. I will be strong side no matter what, and then kind of like being left in 2v4 scenarios quite often. And that's just been less of the case this year, partly because they've been a bit more aware of what's happening on the map. And there is some credit that has to be given to NT and to Crash for their control of vision and awareness of the jungler.
That, ladies and gentlemen, the lighting behind me has gone down, meaning that apparently it is time for us to talk about V3 versus the Hawks. I have no idea what's going on outside. Apparently it's cloudy now, and Nymaera is still sunny.
Oh, I am, but then also I also still have someone in the flat above me playing Seether's Broken still for many hours on repeat. I'm really worried they're having an awful breakup. But literally, they've been playing this for hours over the last week. It's been a trip, I tell you.
Wow. V3 versus the Hawks, ladies and gentlemen. Which, let's be real. Let's get predictions out. No. Yes. No. Gentlemen, I know our predictions because I've already seen the document for all of us. So I know where we're all leaning. And I think it makes more sense for us to preface this with our predictions first, and then to kind of talk about these two teams, so our biasty is well and truly out there, and people can kind of take it as they will. I'm going 3-1 for the V3. I hinted towards on broadcast I might not be going for a 3-0 like I did with Sengoku Gaming. And yeah, I'm going 3-1. V3 Esports will beat the Hawks. Gentlemen, which way are you going? Initialize first, please.
I am actually agreeing with you. I think it's going to be V3-3-1.
Okay. Nymaera, where are you currently sitting?
Well, I just checked my predictions. That's exactly what I said too, and I'd stick by that. I think I can't see a reason right now that I'd change that.
Obviously, live on broadcast just before the games go live will be the lock-in period for the final predictions. And if you are interested in joining us for your predictions, you can either join us over on the Discord, or you can join the actual document as well. That's also on our Discord, or just tweet at us. Hey, why not? Just say, hey, I think they're going to win, and this is our score, and we'll probably maybe give you a shout out as well. So we're all going V3 favored. We all think that the Hawks could upset them once, and I think that's fair with Dasher, Zenit, Corporal, Tussle, and Appermen. There's definitely upset potential there. But this feels like it should be their... Well, it should be V3's game. The previous two times showing, we've seen these two teams fight off. V3 have won both these games. The first one, for me, it was a pretty even game, and then it just dropped off an absolute cliff from back-to-back team fights. Ooh, gentlemen, you've just flickered, and now we're all back. Is everything still good?
We're good.
We're good. Okay, very
cool.
good, very good. So, obviously, game number one was a very slow game where it was very even, and then huge team fights coming out, and Ace pulling out his set, going humongous, going 10 or 1 and 5 on that set. And then game number two, when they met a second time around, it wasn't even close. I mean, again, it was a weird one. It was like close for the first 15, 20 minutes, 17 minutes, and then a huge team fight erupted. And then V3 Esports just closed this one out even quicker, even safer, and more decisively. The second one was a very weird one because nothing happened for ages, and then it was all over. I'm expecting, honestly, more of the same from this series. Not a lot to happen. Hawks have a half decent laning phase, and then they fall apart, and we saw that against everything that they've ever played. Like their DFM game, it was like,
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Hawks, and I think that if they are going to snag a win, it's going to be through Corporal being on the same form he was on versus DFM in their last matchup. Finding the really huge Alistar engages, on a champion which allows you to have that kind of playmaking potential. I actually think this could be a 3-0.
Yeah.
I think this.
I mean, the betting odds are saying it should be a 3-0. Like, if I actually had money on this, I'd go 3-0.
I'm wondering if I should actually change it to that, because like
my heart.
I look at this and I'm like, what have the Hawks actually done to? Well, if they get a lead out of laning phase, what have they actually done to close that out? Not very much, particularly for me. I know that Zenit's had good laning stats and often come out of the early game with sizable amounts of gold in pocket and leads too. He's had games on stuff like the Samira and the Azrael, but him alone is not enough to carry this team. He's struggled to get the damage out. Sometimes, in fact, actually, it would have been one of those for, I think it actually might have been versus V3, actually. I'm trying to remember. It would have been that first game where he was on the Samira. Later in that day, he went 14-3-4, but the first game, he was like flashing onto the Scion and dying. Like, he was trying to find these big plays and just not getting there, and that's kind of been the story of the Hawks, really. They've kind of had some decent early games, but just failed to make the big plays work. They've just not had that star power.
And again, part of my issue with the Hawks has been that their laning phase is really good, particularly, as we said, for Dasher, for Zenit, for Corporal in particular. They've done some good things, like even versus DFM and stuff. We saw Corporal and Zenit forcing flashes, all that kind of good stuff. There goes, okay, the mechanics on these guys isn't the issue. We know that Dasher has shown up and put out good numbers across the split, but why are they losing? And it has been, and I think every time it comes up, I just start screaming about their objective control and their vision control.
God.
The fact that I have seen games where they have lost vision control simultaneously of Baron and Dragon at once, is actually remarkable. And it needs to improve. Tussle has the worst vision scores or the vision stats of pretty much any jungler in the league. He's got very poor DPM stats. Hell, he's beaten by Secret in DPM. Like, he's beaten by a support in DPM. Like, this guy's just not been having a good split, and I've defended him a fair amount. He's had 1 or 2 good games.
You have.
But when it's been bad, it's been real bad. And
I mean,
like,
we can easily sum up the Hawks in like this: they only beat Burning Core, Axis, and Crest Gaming Act.
And they won 1-1.
And this was
last year, didn't
always,
they?
yeah, they beat one game of Crest Gaming Act very early on, like
Yeah.
week 1, week
It's
2.
their first
and that
game,
was
in
it.
fact, actually.
Oh yeah, it was actually,
The
yeah.
very
so,
first
yeah.
game.
yeah. And so, like, I'll put this one out and saying, look,
Oh no, that might
I
be
don't
Burning
have
Core, actually.
issues with some of the actual carry mechanics, but it's very difficult to set up for an AD carry or a mid laner on something like Azir to team fight if you can't see who you're supposed to be fighting, and you can't set up because you have no vision control against objectives. You just have to see the fight, and therefore you don't do any DPM because you can't take the fight, or you get jumped and die. Like, there's not really much of a ground to fight from. And so I'm hoping, the reason I'm expecting potentially one game is actually the Hawks from ahead look decent. Like, they actually know what they're doing from a lead. They snowball pretty well. They've got good carries. And that's fine. If they're ever even or behind, they never win the vision war. They only win the vision war from ahead. And I'm expecting maybe one game where they get to snowball out to a lead with, Dasher, Zenit, Corporal, having the mechanics to get them to that point, and they'll get something from there. But I absolutely see a world where that's just not going to happen, and Muujin in particular runs them over.
I will say that the one thing which I think may lead to a game win for the side of the Hawks is that they might end up upsetting Cog with Apperman with a really strong split pusher, because Cog has looked a bit disconnected from the rest of V3 in a couple of their losses. He's also had a really good split in general. I think he's one of the better top laners in the LJL right now. There is a chance, though, that it isn't so peachy and things kind of get a bit awkward around that top side, though.
But my counterpoint is that Tussle and Apperman have not been working in harmony at all this split. Meaning, I think Cog will probably... I think your point is absolutely right. And if it was honestly any other top jungle duo, honestly, when I mean any other
actually.
6 teams, even Axis, I would give way more of an opportunity to that. I think this is honestly the worst top jungle 2v duo at the moment, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, because Apperman showed that even as late as his last game, when Pyrion and Blank were already waving goodbye because they weren't getting the money, Apperman was still putting up decent results and stat-wise on the Rift. So I don't know. It feels... I don't know if it's Apperman, I don't know if it's Tussle, but I've already voiced my concerns around Tussle and Dasher before, so I don't know if that's still a thing.
Like, I'll throw it out as well. Like, that last game we saw from Cog on the Tristana, like, he was running people over in lane and doing some really good things in the mid game. The one time Hollow
that's ranged top laners for you.
Yeah, well, exactly. But there is a world where you say, okay, so Muujin just plays around top, puts wards down. Hawks can't do anything about it, and it's basically like, okay, we have a Tristana that's got killed, that's facing off against Apperman in a solo isolated lane. You guys can't play the vision game. GG. There is no step 3. Like, it's done.
I mean, that's something we haven't actually covered, have we? Have we covered the tiebreaker match? Obviously, you can go see our coverage on our YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen. Have we actually done it?
I think we did last time, didn't we?
I can't remember.
What happened after? So remember, it's on the Thursday.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure. This is the first podcast. I mean, there's not much to say. It was it was the hardest game maybe I've ever had to cast as a color, because fucking nothing happened. Like, actually nothing happened for ages.
Top laners for you.
It was, I mean, the thing is, honestly, I feel like this game was partly lost in draft by V3 because for some reason Hollow insisted on playing Varus. And then we got a Tahm Kench, but we didn't get a Senna. It's...
So, I mean, the thing is that, like, Poke Varus has typically been a really good answer to, like, stuff like Xayah, because Xayah actually isn't that long range. Her feathers make her seem like that, but she's actually not. And you don't exactly have early sustain and stuff. So, like, you can see Gango just went towards, like, steel toe caps. It's like, okay, I'll get some armor on me. That's actually...
he was just like, fine, fuck it.
Well, like, no, I don't... I actually think that if you're going to play Varus, I really think Varus Nico is a huge combo. But having the Tahm Kench just means that you're meant to be very hard to displace. But, yeah, I guess it didn't work out, huh?
So the thing is, V3 were miles and miles and miles and miles ahead, and the Tristana was literally
Yeah,
there was
like
one point
3K
where we saw,
ahead.
like it got further. I think they got like
4.6k.
crazy.
Yeah.
They got
For
30
30
near
minutes,
5k ahead. Yeah, and at this point it was one kill, and they were that far ahead
Yeah,
because
4K,
Tristana
yeah.
was basically getting to take down towers in a second flat, and there wasn't a lot that Sengoku could do without it. Tom Kench goes to ward once, and Paz and who else was it? Somebody else like jumps at him, and the AD carry was what was
Yeah, it was Gango.
Yeah, Gango flash forward basically. They both flash on him and they kill him under tower. They get the one pick onto Hollow, they take Baron, and they end the game off it. They literally get the game, and then they ace them going down mid lane, get all the turrets and the game in a moment of seconds flat.
I would like to give a bit of criticism, and this is something where we could see it. Muujin had a pretty bad game on this Nidalee, especially when he didn't camp mid as much as I was expecting, as they had the Renekton mid, which is a thing you can actually do with Ace and Cog. You can actually just go, hey guys, your pulls are just wild as anything. Play Tristana top Cog, and I'll play the Renekton mid. We can still get everything we need to. Muujin basically couldn't gank top because range versus range, so that's just not going to ever happen. It goes to the mid. Ace got on top of Ramine a fair few times on this Renekton. You can, because slice, dice, stun, easy. Muujin just, I don't know, Muujin just wasn't around this map, and it was weird because they could have definitely done something bot lane, but they didn't, even with a I don't know. It was a weird game. And I think Muujin's pressure and availability was bad.
So I guess for my perspective, because obviously I didn't cast it, you know, I watched over a couple of the highlights to skim through it and whatever, but does this change your opinion of V3 heading into this best of 5 rather, or is this really the more kind of thing? So it doesn't change it for that. I mean, nor did it really.
It did for me a little bit.
Okay, all right.
In that specifically, it showed a very different playstyle. This is quite a hard comp to pull off. In that effectively, your only form of engage is the Varus throwing out a Chains of Corruption. Yeah, that or Renekton flashing in for the stun. Like that's what you've got for engage. Everything else is basically you've got double poke with double frontline and a split pushing Tristana. So and at which point, really, what you actually do is you have the Renekton on one side lane with maybe the Nidalee like ghosting behind to see whether you can catch someone on 1v2, or coming towards mid where you've got poke Varus and poke Nidalee, mixed poke damage, looking to try and chunk people out and keep people off the map. And you let Tristana and Renekton take down side lanes, and you win the 1-3-1 with Tahm Kench to keep your poke people safe. And then basically you win objectives by getting wave pressure, turning up to an objective, and just poking people out really, really hard with the advantages you've got already from the gold you've snowballed. But you can't really finish up kills unless you flash tongue lash someone. You don't really have a lot of ways of locking people down. You can only poke people out. And it showed throughout the game because actually they were trying to Abyssal Voyage to side lanes to try and get picks, and people would flash, and you get the flash, but you could never lock them down afterwards because you didn't have any more CC. And that's part of what made this comp really hard, because you understand the concept, right? You've got lots of poke to keep people low so they can't fight you.
I was just voicing the concern.
But you just don't have an easy way of starting fights on your terms. And you kind of saw it that they get caught once and they lose. Like, it was done. And that's kind of the risk with a comp like this. And like I am impressed that V3 tried to pull it off, and it worked well for a certain amount of time. I will also say that it is perhaps a mark of a touch of hubris to try and pull off such a difficult comp when you've definitely shown some weaknesses. And
I just hate
that colors things a bit.
I just hate Tahm Kench defensive lanes. They just slow the game down so much.
You know what I was just thinking this whole time? I was like, what if that Tahm Kench, if V3 fully leaned even more so into ranged, what about if they just play Bard here? Well, Sengoku just can't end the game in the same way.
You die to Leona in lane. It's very hard. It's awkward. That's the problem. No, like
the thing is, they gave over the Leona, so
this
that
is the
was
thing,
kind of their own.
Yeah, I actually wonder if Braum is a better pick.
Maybe.
Because Braum, well, but then you lose out on the rotations. Either way, like, I mean, you do lose a lot of your engage potential if you pick a Tahm Kench support. Luckily, you tend to play stuff like Senna or Varus, so you kind of pick up that kind of edge of things. So, and I actually wonder if this is maybe V3 showing that the players which had the engage tools were maybe not as comfortable doing that. Because a lot of my philosophy in terms of like how when I've played in teams or I've kind of helped coach teams or whatever has been, okay, who's comfortable with their roles in the team, right? Because while you might not be playing the same champions, like do you really need your support to be on engage, or actually are they not comfortable with it? What happens if they need to be playing hook champions, something like that? What happens if actually your mid laner needs to be on a control mage and they can't play stuff? Sometimes you have to work around your players' sensibilities and whatever, right? So I think if V3 have shown that, that's, well, one, it's dangerous actually, because you're showing actually if we just ban away all the engaged champions from their support, what happens, Reiner? What happens? And, you know, if you have to force, you know, one of their other players onto a role that's not as comfortable fitting within their team mechanism, you know, is something. I don't think this is going to be a problem versus the Hawks. I think it might be a problem versus Sengoku. That's what I'm saying. Because if they can end up drafting a way to, like, force them towards certain champions, that's an issue.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down too far down that avenue, as we do have a viewer question around that one.
Sure.
Yeah. I suppose before we finish up with this one, then, I guess what I'll say is, this was a hard comp to pull off for V3. They tried it. I think my issue is partly they were looking for fights when their comp wasn't really supposed to do it. They were just supposed to poke and take towers. And it took them too long to get as far as they did. Like, yes, they snowballed. Yes, they kind of were gradually building their lead. But it took them 30 minutes to get all the towers they wanted to. At which point you have an Azir at 3 items and a Xayah at 3 items. And they just pull one. And then basically Ona finds one engage and you're done. Like, I mean, you won't win the 5v5s at that point. I think it just took too long to get to a point where they were pushing. And I think they should have been
a bigger problem for me is they got 2k gold ahead at the 10-minute mark. They were only 2.5k gold at the 22-minute mark. Like, they got 500 extra gold, and yes, it was jumping up and down, but it was only a few hundred jumping up and down, and it was only slightly up even 12 minutes later, which is, to emphasize your point there, Sam, that's not what they needed to do. They needed to get really steamball it ahead. They got 2k ahead. Great. Keep pushing. Keep going further. They didn't find it, and V3 sadly lost that game, even though they, just before the end of the game, they was 4.6k ahead at the 30-minute mark, and then they lost the game with only 216 gold behind. Weird state of affair.
Yeah. Like, if they'd been 4.6k ahead at 25 minutes, it would have been a different matter. Like, the fact they took the fact that, like, basically credit to Sengoku for playing patient and scaling up and getting the 3 items on their carries and then looking for the fight. But for V3, it's like, cool idea for a comp, hard to execute, kind of worked, needed to be a little bit more ruthless with the leads you got.
So, it's not changed for me. It's how I see V3. I mean, this is honestly, I expected this from V3. Like, I went into this game expecting Sengoku to win. I got my prediction correct. Even with V3, and I remember what casting this game with you, Sam. Even with V3 getting ahead this game, I never felt like they were ever winning. Does that make sense? Like, while they're like 3 or 4k gold ahead, I never thought they were actually winning this game. It always felt rather close because it always felt like it was just one team fight away for Sengoku Gaming. And this is where I am with V3 versus the Hawks at the moment, to just bring that back and to end that point. I think that's why we're all just going V3 winning this series versus the Hawks, right?
I actually just changed my prediction to a 3-0 because I look at this and I'm like, actually, the Hawks have not been good at closing out games. I don't think they've particularly had good grasp on their win conditions. I don't think V3 are flawless. I think they're good enough though to. We
just saw how they're not flawless, right?
No, yeah. I think that I don't. And also the thing is that while the Hawks are strong in lane, they don't punish lane, and that means that V3. So V3 are not going to go 0-5 in top lane like they did versus Sengoku, right? In their second regular season matchup, not the tiebreaker, the one before that, right? Where Kog'Kog got a bit dumped on top side. Exactly. So I look at this and I'm thinking, I don't see the Hawks punishing V3 enough to stop them from getting to a point where they actually know how to hold their win conditions. And I don't think the Hawks, even with a strong laning phase, unless there's a huge draft error where Seraphine gets through and they have, like, you know, another, like, hyper carry pick to kind of play around, I don't think V3 are going to fall into that kind of pitfall.
Yeah, I think there's a world where V3 don't get their carries onto picks that they're happy with, but I think on the converse, I expect V3 will still be fairly favored in this matchup purely because they have so many strings in their playbook, both they can show they can play. That's what that final tiebreaker game did show me. It's like, hey, we can play a completely different style of comp again and look pretty good at it, even if it was a bit slow. I think if they did that versus the Hawks would have even less to say.
Well, gentlemen, we will have to see how that series goes. We will be bringing you all out there live coverage of that match. I believe 8 a.m. GMT is the call time that we have got, gentlemen. So definitely going to be excited. We have got a producer in for that game, ladies and gentlemen. So Nymaera is relieved of
Get
his
to go get myself a
duty.
cuppa a bit more often.
Yeah, basically. To bring us to the end of the podcast, gentlemen, Ishiki asks us, Sengoku Gaming in good form. Will they beat down V3 / the Hawks, or perhaps Rascal Jester too? So hinting towards their prediction of that Juggernaut match. But let's first talk about Gauntlet match. Gauntlet, Juggernaut, Gauntlet, Juggernaut. Okay, I was right the first time around. Good. Will they beat down V3 and the Hawks first, gentlemen? And they're asking, will it be a beat down?
Yeah.
There you go. Beat down going. Will Rascal Jester, though, get beat down? Or do you even think Rascal Jester will be there?
I think Rascal
Quick
Jester are
hint.
losing the first best of 5.
Okay.
I will say that, but we've got like a lot more. We've got a whole other podcast episode to talk about that. We don't need to spend time.
Oh
about
yeah, that's
that.
why I don't
Come
want
back
to go
next
too
week. Yeah. Beating down the loser of the Juggernaut match. Nah, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the way that you can beat Rascal Jester is having a very good strong side top laner. I think that's one way, right?
You know what we should do for this? We should use the GIF of the question. Will they get beat down? Nah.
Nah.
All right. Well, will Rascal Jester?
It's like, oh no. Anyway. Yeah, I
Anyway.
think that maybe the way that you beat down Rascal Jester is by having like a very strong side top laner and kind of punishing Kanatu, even though that he has managed to play.
Ebby.
So Ebby is the kind of player that will probably be, you know, give a team a very good advantage over that team, although he gives advantages over every team, let's be honest. But I don't think that Paz is the person who really explodes laning phase enough for that. I think that the bot lane is going to be really fun to watch. I think that it could be a close series. It's never going to be a beatdown. I think that it's probably going to be... Yeah, I think that Sengoku are contenders. And that's saying something, considering how the early split went. But I think they're contenders. I don't think they're going to win. I would say that they're kind of definitely solid third. I don't think that they're like pushing towards... First would be... It's out of sight for me, I think. But I think third... verging second if they come out with really good prep, but I just don't see where they're winning hard enough to really punish Rascal Jester, which has been so mutable and flexible. But yeah, V3,
Right,
V3, I think they can just total, particularly given how the bot lanes have been both performing recently.
I'll give Sengoku more of a fair shout against Rascal Jester purely because I think Sol and Secret can at least fight fire with fire in the bot lane. But I think that, and I also think like Hachimeches potentially is smart enough in the early game to start doing some interesting things to make Crash's life a little bit more tricky as well. That said, we have to wait and see whether we get there. We don't know what form people are coming into playoffs. I think Sengoku are ramping up, which does the question is how much. So I will be interested to see how the Sengoku best of 5 goes against either what we're expecting to be V3 or perhaps the Hawks, depending if we're all real wrong. But I think that best of 5 will be a little bit more indicative of what to expect about how much Sengoku can challenge.
So quick one, last little one, just using Ishiki's question here. What happens if the Hawks beat V3?
It's even worse for them.
Does that change anything depending on the fashion that the Hawks beat V3? Does that change potentially that maybe Sengoku can't beat down the Hawks if they show some new way of playing or something new has happened for the Hawks? And even with V3 banning out, they're still revitalized maybe in one of their lanes or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to maybe give hope for any Hawks fans out there. Is there a chance or is it dead?
There's a lot of good players. Well, there's a lot of players on the Hawks that we have a lot of faith in, right? I mean, like Apperman, Dasher, Corporals, Zenit's had moments. Like, if Tussles stops being silly around Vision, then, there are players on this squad that could be really good. They have yet to show it to us consistently, particularly when games have been tough. That's my main issue. When games have been tough, they've not been so great.
Yeah.
I think that Sengoku are always going to be favored over whoever's coming out the other side of the bracket. I don't see them really batting an eyelash at them. Yeah, they'll have to prep course they will. I don't think as long as they don't come in under overconfident. I think even if they do, they're probably going to crush lane. The way that they lose is by having like serious draft issues, but it's a best of 5. You don't get to do that for so many games. I think maybe a team on a good day could snatch a game. I think the Hawks could maybe snatch a game. I don't think they're even going to do that versus V3 though. I just don't see it happening over the best of 5.
Well, gentlemen, we will have to wait and see. V3 Esports will be facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming this Saturday, 8 a.m. GMT, if you're interested in watching our live coverage of all of that. But gentlemen, that does bring us to an absolute end of the episode here. We've covered everything around the Sengoku Crest Gaming Act, and that means we never have to talk about Crest Gaming Act again until we get to summer, where we will get to start talking about their opportunities again. However, with that said, Sengoku Gaming will still stay in our hearts as one of the opportunities, as they will have an opportunity to try and represent the L at MSI. But with that all said, you can find this podcast on all audio streaming platforms. You can find each of our lovely Twitter handles beneath our faces, and I think Instagram handles as well, because we're smart people and
Mine's
use the
pretty
same
much the
username
same,
for
yeah.
more than one places. So at MaskedSwan, at Initia1ise with a 1, and at Nymaera. You can also find the LJLOU's content, of course, on all major stream platforms. Just type in LJL Unofficial LJLOU, and you can normally find us right at the very top. If you're not quite sure, our Twitter link or Discord link is always in the show notes down below. But that's it, gentlemen. We're done.
Show's over. Go home.
Thank you so much for watching. While you're here, go home.
You can stick around for tea if you want.
I just finished mine.